Hello all, my name is Charlie McGregor, but I'm better known as Chance, and for good reason. My story is a strange one, alas, no stranger than anyone else's on here. I chose this place to tell my tale, but I didn't choose what happened to me. However, I did make choices afterwards that were life and death for everyone involved with me. A feverish somnium of nightmares used to plague me and my every breath, and heartbeat still every toss and turn, a gallon of cold sweat that drowned my will to exist, causing hysteria in my own mind, like I was fighting a war with myself. I was losing. In our dreams, we are all alone, no guiding light or advice or support. Because we have stepped behind the veil, REM, sleep is when we do this. Rapid eye movement, they call it, but my REM sleep was different for 2 nights out of the year. On these 2 nights, I could do more than just step behind the veil. It was something godlike. Now, the most important part of this is I was immortal when I crossed the veil, or the alternate reality. As I crossed that veil, nothing could hurt me in real life, because I was dreaming. Even in all this immunity, I was still petrified of the flames of that house. I detest my selfishness for all of these years. I should have tried harder to find a way to set them free. But I ran out of answers. I came to dead ends, and I felt like I was kicking a dead horse. But now, my breaths grow shallow, like they should have in that burning house all those times, all those years ago. Even in my darkest hour, when I wished for death before it would come, it fled from me still, yet sought out those I couldn't save. But now, know that I don't just want to unburden my heart, only that I think enough time has passed that someone should hear the truth about that house. You need to hear what really happened and why, so that the memorial of the burning house of memories does not start happening once more. I say this with a warning that is grave, as I have started to have the nightmares plague me once more. You see, if and when a new house stood, and I fear stands again, on the memorial grounds, it will burn again, trapping those within it along with their souls. Disrespected, powerful, and now seemingly unhinged lost souls of the Monroes sought retribution. Rache is the German word for revenge, as both sets of their grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and going through something like that with someone makes a bond strong. Stronger than death in this case. That is the reason I think the timeline's fractured. In this case, as in every, I do believe that the universe can only stand so much injustice before it corrects itself any way it can, to even the score, so to speak. Karma, some call it. Somehow a fracture occurred in the two realities which had the worlds mirroring each other to the T. Such a phenomenon as this fracture in the two timelines could only be derived from such an anger. Not to be believed, but to be able to bleed through was enough to burn a house down from the other side. The realtor company that desecrated the memorial grounds was a proud German, and the landlord, as he was also mine. The Monroes were my neighbors of 15 years, as they were still a young couple, just getting into their late 30s after finally being able to conceive and having 2 children of which they loved so very much. They waited a very long time for those children, and they were very happy, which makes the next part of the story even harder to tell. My wife's love for me and the Monroes' hatred and loss fractured or altered the timeline. They clashed together so I could step behind the veil to an alternate reality, but go forward in time, and when I woke up, I had actually gone into the future of the next night at midnight. The house was already engulfed in flames at this point, as they would burn it down every time without fail. The lost souls of the innocent took on a much darker feel. Hard to understand, I know, The first time it happened, I had headaches for days, just trying to wrap my mind around it, while at the same time trying to figure out what the fuck just happened. You're asking me what the hell I'm talking about. That I really lost it and I might need to see a therapist. I have lived with the consequences of them daily for the last 35 years. It was 1985, and the Monroes had just had their second child. The people started calling the house cursed years later, but I disagree. I was the one who was cursed. Of that, I'm sure. My conscience is polyamorous when it comes to the scale of honor and cowardice. It's unacceptable, and I'm ashamed of it. Hopefully, I can unburden my soul enough to forgive myself for this fact. Then maybe, just maybe, their souls can rest too. My tale is one of great loss, and not for the faint of heart. I find the strangest part is I didn't even know the people I lost, but nevertheless, it distorted me a little more each and every time that I failed them. Every time I couldn't save them. They took pieces of my soul with them as they burned alive, leaving me more and more empty, which made it easier for the pain to find a way in and make a home. For years, the people I failed have haunted my conscience, the unescapable guilt running in me deep, adjacent to the responsibility I felt to save them. But I can't let the guilt follow me to my grave, even though it's all over now, and I can finally sleep at night. Only I haven't been sleeping so well lately. The nightmares plague my slumber, yet again, and they are still as real as ever. I can still smell the smoke, feel the heat of the fire as the flames lick my skin, and the heat of the deadliest element on earth dry out my flesh till it cracks and bleeds. Fire is nothing to mess around with, ever. Whenever you go into a burning house, there's actually no breathable air. The flames get so high so damn quickly due to this fact. They eat everything, including all of the oxygen. That's what gives everything life in the end, I guess, even if it is taking it at the same time. I learned very quickly in life that anything and everything you see in TV and the movies is complete bullshit. When they run into the house again and again with no thought for their own mortality, just not realistic. I know this because that was me. Stupid, I know. No matter how noble, this happens more often than you think. Love makes us do crazy things, I think the saying is. This has never been more true than when a fire is engulfing everything you've ever known or cared about. So, more often than not, they try to be a hero, which is an act of valor in itself. The bravery and balls it takes to do such a thing is unmatched and unrivaled except by selflessness. No more will their beloved set eyes upon their smiling faces. Like their charred remains is more like it. Adrenaline and instinct make the mortality of it all insignificant and unworthy of a second thought, instead of heeded. You are going in blind, is what I'm saying. Unless you're Superman, cutting your way through that black smoke all the while, forcing your lungs to filter smoke and toxic fumes. Now, whether they choose to cover their face and attempt to breathe through their shirt or a bandana, they will most likely suffocate before they reach their target and back out again. This is a truth we must all come to accept. But that just wasn't in the cards for me. I would go to sleep the eve of the anniversaries, and I dreamed of the house of memories burning down, and every time I had a chance to save them, then I would wake up unharmed, and I would be reeking of smoke, and they would all be dead. I tried to believe I was going crazy, that I would have been better or easier, but just went out and bought new shells for my grandfather's shotgun, and I had all but given up hope. It happened, and it made me realize I could change it. Not in real life, it seemed, but in the alternate reality on those 2 nights, I could save them. The first time I would find this to be utterly convincing beyond reason was when my dream world started to bleed over into reality, with no other explanation other than the outcome of my dream. Now, having eased you into this dreadful tale, I think you're ready for the how of this nightmare all started. But be forewarned, I try not to think about it, ever. It truly was sad, so quick and final. This is my first-hand account. I told the police the same story, and I'll never forget. Me and my beautiful wife, who had just beaten breast cancer, was finally home, just in time for Christmas. She was standing there with them, with the Monroe family. That earth-shattering crunch and shrill screams of them all when their lives were cut short as they were run down by the German landlord's son, all liquored up again, and his heavier-than-life truck. I remember when I came out on my porch at 3:30 p.m. Oh, how the snow glistened like diamonds on that sunny, snow-covered day. Now the Monroes and their 3-year-old daughter, Sally, and 9-month-old son, Toby, were going for a walk with Mommy and Daddy. It was the first time Toby had seen snow, and Sally wanted to take her new puppy for a walk, since she couldn't open her presents yet. After we spoke, they took Toby for his first look at the snow. He gripped it in his hand, his tiny hand, and smiled a soft, happy, and very intelligent smile. The puppy broke loose from Sally's grip, and my wife, having gone to check our mail at the curb for fresh exercise, doing her good. My poor, unknowing wife snatched the leash of the puppy as it ran by her. She then proceeded to walk the puppy back to Sally, and stole another look at what she could never have, cancer robbing her of more than just her hair. She pinched the baby's cheek again and turned to come back, rubbing her hands together and blowing, trying to warm them. She took 2 steps, and then it happened. I haven't forgotten the way the tires screeched on the slick street, melted with sun, and during the 35 minutes that we talked, it had frozen it back over now. Helpless as the horror show unfolded in slow motion in front of my very eyes, still beat my heart. I cried out in the loudest I have ever been, or ever will be again. Look out! And it was over. They were gone. Just like that. Like the devil snapped his fingers and took their smiles from this world and took mine for forever as a parting gift. I couldn't fathom the scene that lay beyond the old truck on its side. My wife looking up too late. The Monroes bracing for the impact. Their last moments. I locked eyes with that little girl, Sally, just before the shock in her eyes, wide. At the last 3 seconds, our eyes met, and then the truck wiped them from my life in one fell swoop. I felt as though if I had been hit by that truck. As my legs collapsed and I grappled the railing of my porch like a paralyzed person who was learning to walk again, the truck slid sideways on the slick road and then started to roll. The fear in their eyes as they shielded their children like a suit of armor. When the truck met them in an earth-shattering crunching of metal, my wife, my dear friends, crushed. The new little family was crushed to death on impact. That Chevy truck that had rolled over on them and off again, but the damage was done. It finally rested in the snowy bank, steaming and clinking with hot metal cooling in the snow. It lay exactly the spot where the burning house of memories would be built in the dreadful coming years. The love of my life, my beautiful wife, and our poor neighbors were unrecognizable. I threw up as I choked, and then I opened my eyes. My gaze fell upon little Toby first. He was not much to look at, with his little blanket still clenched tightly in his mother's arms, forevermore. Then I looked for signs of life in Sally, and I wish I hadn't. She was a sad, sweet little thing, forever young, a permanent snow angel. She didn't have a chance. I was afraid to let my eyes wander to my wife, gasping for breath. I was paralyzed by fear. The true coward that I was so afraid of death that I couldn't even manage 5 more steps towards her. She didn't even know I was there as she stared at the sky, tears pulling in her eyes as her face beheld an expression reflecting her torture. She parted her crimson-stained lips and teeth and hissed my name, her breath freezing in the air. She lay there broken in the snow, and all I thought to do was watch as she coughed and sent blood skyward. She then quivered violently as she began to gurgle my name instead of speak it. And at the very last moments, as a twist of fate, she turned her head and looked at me and smiled. I was suddenly aware that I could move again, and I was also suddenly aware that everything else had gone very still. I sank to my knees, and I crawled to her like a coward I was. When I reached her, I cradled her in my arms. I buried my face in her sweater, only realizing then that her sweet scent was a mix of coppery blood, gasoline with burnt motor oil, and flung myself from her side to retch in the snow, shamefully. Then on the ground, I noticed things I wish I hadn't been close enough to see. Things I wish the shock and trauma would have made me forget. When the truck had rolled on them and off again, it had left a path in the snow. Spread over the path were big crimson stains, droplets of blood. There were pieces of flesh, hair, mixed with oil and gasoline, and bits of torn clothing. I reached over to pick up my wife's necklace, laying indented in the snow. I had just bought it, and had given it to her for Christmas. Putting it in my pocket, I turned to look. The sun was almost set now, as the last light peeked behind the tree to glance off a little baby rattle that read Toby. I sat there, as frozen as the snow around me, in a state of mind worse than shock. I don't remember getting up, and my self-preservation switch kicked on at this point, I think, from somewhere deep inside. I knew there was nothing that could have been done to save her, to save any of them. As I watched it all rewind and then forward again in my head, I saw her quiver and take her last breath, not looking anymore. Screams, tires screeched, the sound of crunching bones and metal against soft flesh, blood being obliterated at a high rate of speed, the impact as it collided, and it was over just that fast. There was nothing I could have done, other than scream sooner. I wish I would have. I would later find out that her cause of death was drowning. She drowned in her own blood. After their deaths, the people of the town built a memorial in their honor, with wooden crosses and teddy bears, candles, and a newly taken picture for their Christmas card. Somebody even dug and buried the puppy right there on the memorial spot. I waited till most had gone and put my own cross on the spot. It was beautifully carved, with swirls of navy and sky blue that reflected in the color of the snow, like a mirror. It was 3 foot tall, with her name in gold letters. I was the only keeper of her heart. She was an only child, and her parents had died when she was only 3. Relatives raised her, and she left them as she turned 18. We met shortly after, and were inseparable ever since. But now I was left behind. She took all meaning of life with her. More alone than I ever felt in this world, I cried. Great big heaving sobs. And I asked her why. Why you? The wind picked up as I got no answer from her small wooden cross. I looked back at her, and before more words could form on my lips, the wind turned to gusts and nearly knocked me down. I steadied myself against it and braced my feet for another onslaught of invisible danger. None came. I went back inside, and I could see the memorial from my kitchen window. It made me happy and sad at the same time, and only matched by disgust and hatred. I went to bed after a full and frivolous day. I thought about the accident and finally fell asleep as tears I had been holding back formed in the corner of my eyes. I did this every day until the day the landlord sold the property. He sold it. He sold the memorial grounds. The first dream I had started out as a house I had never seen before was burning on our street. I could smell the smoke. It burned my nostrils, but it didn't make me cough or choke. I knew at this point I was dreaming, of course. I knew it without knowing it. And I would say it was a dream, and that I was dream clairvoyant, if you will. Because if I was there for a reason, of which I knew, but knew nothing about, but knew everything about. As I ran into the house, I could breathe just fine. I looked around for anyone and see 3 children in the floor. They didn't make it out in time and collapsed from smoke inhalation. I went to grab one hand and threw the other child over my shoulder, and then took the hand of the other 2, and commenced dragging them to the door just feet away, when the house gave a deep groan. Snap! Snap! Sorry. Was Dr. Creepin? He heard my comment. And then the front part of the second story collapsed onto me and the children, who were now running out of time. As the heat of the fire burned my skin and boiled my blood, the remaining heavy boards above me gave way under their own weight, giving another arduous groan. And with a sudden whoosh, it fell, too. It fell faster than lightning, it seemed like, leaving me no time to react, essentially pinning my body to the floor and the rest of the already burnt and fallen house. I could smell my hair burning, and embers had made their way down into my ear canals and burned my eardrums till all I heard was sizzling and rain, and then nothing. I knew we were doomed. The oxygen was raw from my lungs like a thief in the night. Where I was able to breathe smoke, I could not breathe nothing. I gasped, and the support beam for the house started to give, and it made a high-pitched that crescendoed into a terrifying cracking, crunching noise. This beam was larger than life, ablaze with hellfire. It seemed to aim for us, like it was intentionally trying to thwart any heroic plans I had predisposed to. The house was aiming for me. I swear it. I dragged the children underneath me as the best I could. Not that it would have mattered. I had to do something as they lay helpless and dying. I held them close and told them it was going to be okay. Again, not that it mattered. They couldn't hear me. Just hang on to the sound of my voice. It was the last words they heard when it hit me. I was ready, and not so sure this was a dream anymore. As the roof gave way, firefly like golden and orange embers flew from either end of the breaking points, so beautiful and ugly at the same time. And then it hit me, killing me and the small children, had this not been a dream. So instead of dying, my vision went black, and I heard my wife's soft laughter in the distance. My soul reached for it in the dark. I felt her soft lips kiss my cheek, and it woke me, only to realize that there was a tear that had landed on my cheek instead. This continued on in my dreams every anniversary of the desecration of the memorial site, and on Christmas Eve when they tragically lost their lives. But the house would burn regardless, always at the stroke of midnight. The next would be dramatically different, though. As I said, I saved a little girl this time. As I woke, I heard sirens from fire trucks and shouting firemen, and their screams. The screams of horror from the neighbors. The house, which was in fact consumed with fire, but it was different this time. I looked around on a hunch, my eyes darting from firefighter to cop, only to find what I was looking for. Huddled up was a 3-year-old little girl, wrapped in a fire-retardant blanket, sitting on the back of an ambulance. She was crying with an oxygen mask on. So in turn, I was right about 3 things. 1. Today was in fact the day the house would burn. 2. That I could in fact save them in my dreams, and it would then come true in real time. 3. That I must stop another house from being built here no matter what the cost. I have discovered in all the loss of life that life is precious and priceless. If the house had burned, they found the little girl unscathed and unharmed, except for the soot and black marks on her cheeks. Now tear-streaked and stinking with smoke, she was practically unharmed, unless you include emotional trauma. The girl was practically catatonic upon finding out that she was the only survivor. Her happy, loving family of 6 was gone forever, and she alone remained. The rest of the family had burned alive. They would never see this Christmas Day, nor any other. I couldn't save them. They would never get to see her grow up, go to college, get married, or meet their grandchildren, all because I couldn't save them. They died needlessly because of me. I often wondered at the time if it would have been merciful to let her die with them. But I always answer myself the same way. I was able to save her because I was meant to. I was doing so without ever really risking my life. I was able to breathe in that smoke as if it wasn't even there, and that I knew exactly where to find her. When I heard the dog bark, huddled in the corner of the room under a table with a blanket wrapped tightly around them both, completely covering them from the flames that licked at the corners of the couch 5 feet from the fire and right next to her. And her loyal but useless guardian. Her grip on that dog could not have been broken by the devil himself. I walked up to her closer and closer quickly. She was sobbing, and the sight of her, the sound of it, hopeless and lost, crying for her mommy and daddy. All alone, and knowing on some level, I think, that the fire would consume her tiny body. Her little voice grew shrill and more desperate with each passing second. Tears streamed down her soft little cheeks, evaporating before they reached her chin. Still calling to her parents and siblings, she desperately screamed as loud as her voice box would allow, and she screamed for them, but they would never come again. At just 3, she didn't know that. Poor thing. Just trying to escape and being small, despite her efforts. She was tiny, too tiny to reach the door lock, smart enough to know to get out when she couldn't wake her family, but by some sick twist of fate, too small to open the door. In my dreams, the fireman had said one more thing that echoed me back into reality. Again, as these same words were now being spoken in reality. They probably died before the flames touched them, the firefighters said to each other. Then what's her story? You and I both know there's no way she got out of that house by herself. We know the dog sure as fuck didn't open that damn door. For fuck's sake, it was locked. We checked that out and we checked ours and locked. The fireman looked back at his partner, scrunching up his face, and let out a hearty chuckle. He answers his partner while staring on in disbelief at the little girl who was now being rushed to the hospital for smoke inhalation. It's Christmas miracle? Divine intervention? The firefighter said to his partner, ironically lighting a cigarette and walking to the other side of the truck. Fuck, it's something all right, he said, trying not to throw up, staring at the 5 waterlogged and burnt bodies with white sheets. He looked back at them as he climbed into the fire truck and shut the door, and saw big black red stains start to bleed through them all. He looked harder, but a car drove in front of his line of sight, and when he looked again, the stains were gone. After I got back home, I fell into my chair in a heap. But I didn't feel like I usually felt. I didn't feel so desolate, lost. I didn't feel so hopeless. In fact, I felt quite the opposite. For the first time in such a very terribly long time, I felt relief from the years of torment. You don't know the struggle that I fought within myself as an escaped feeling of helplessness, impending doom, crippling my daily lifestyle. I knew I was small and that nothing I said or did while I was awake mattered. Everything in conscious world was in vain, and all for naught. Pouring your coffee seems mundane. Eating your food that has long lost its flavor, still feeling dirty when you get out of the shower. I wished you could wash away your thoughts. I could feel worry ebb as my helplessness eased for the first time in a long time. I felt like I could breathe again. The food tasted better, and the TV was funny for the first time, and I don't know when. I felt myself letting go a little, and I needed to. I don't know why this was happening to me, or how, or when it would stop, if ever. But the one thing I did know was that I had a purpose, and finally being able to fulfill it, even to the smallest degree, made everything okay again, if only for a little while. I felt like I had done something right in all these years of trying to, but failing. And yet there was still a problem that was truly unsettling. And then I was right back to where I was before, but not quite, for I knew I could alter the future. So things had changed somehow, even though I couldn't see them, besides obvious the life I saved, things were altered in my favor. I picked up my phone and called the police station to check on the little girl I'd saved, even if nobody knew I had. The little girl was safe and sound with loving arms to comfort her. She was now with relatives that would love and care for her, even though I would never see her again. I asked them what was going to happen to her, and they wouldn't give me any more information. Go figure. I hung up the phone and went to look out my front window. How in the fuck was I ever going to put this nightmare to bed? No pun intended. Could I possibly prevent any new building completely? Or was that a reasonable expectation? Or was I just dreaming? Again, that pun was intended, yeah. The house still smoldered from the monster that was the vengeful fire, as it continued to persecute and steal happiness from this world. Again and again I played the events over in my head. Would I fall? Would I fail? Just like I had failed 2 families so far. Still the question begged, echoing in my mind, making me feel more hollow. I wished I could escape. The uncertainty was enough to drive a person mad. I could feel it cut through me as the fear made me want to hide somewhere safe from that fire forever. There was more to come. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. Why and how had I been tied to this fractured timelines? Try it again. Why or how had I been tied to the fractured timelines? Why did I dream about it on the eve of the anniversaries, enabling me to step across the veil into the future of both realities? And as time was fleeting, I was miraculously allowed to time enough to save them, if I succeeded at all.